Yes, and I fully agree with that, and it's encouraging to hear you say that. I know on the local level, I know that our borough president is working with the local schools and with NYPD to implement this in our local schools, and it's good to hear that we can work with you on the state level on that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator?
I'd like to note that we've been joined by Senator George Latimer, and next up is Senator John Bonasek.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner. Good to see you. I just would like to preface my remarks before my questions. I have 4 members of my family that are in the public education system. 2 are now retired. I have a daughter and a sister-in-law that teach in the public schools. So I hear about education all the time. One of our top priorities this year is to try to get rid of the GEA. And we know that that's a goal of yours. I would ask you to keep your eye on the small city school districts. They have a lot of, the upstate economy has had a lot of stagnation, urban blight. They need help. I have 2 basic questions. The first one is I share your enthusiasm and your vision for trying to improve education, but I'm very upset when I read articles about the rubber rooms in New York City. When there's 200 to 400 teachers and staffers waiting for disciplinary hearings, costing us between $15 and $20 million, I'm going to ask you what you can do to work with whoever you have to get rid of these rubber rooms, because it's a disservice to good teachers. It's certainly a black eye to the teachers union, and it gives like a pale over everything you're talking about to move education forward in empowering students, as long as these rubber rooms exist. So I guess my first question is, would you do everything in your power to get rid of these rubber rooms once and for all? That would be question number 1. And let me give you question number 2, because I won't talk anymore after I ask you the second question.
Okay.
The education lobby is coming after us for more money, another over $2 billion. And as a state senator, I think I have voted always for the education budget, always given more than what a governor is proposing, regardless of the governor's party. Okay, so we're a believer in education. But when we're spending about $23,000 per student, and the national average is about $11,500, and we're about in the middle in an achievement, do you think there are other things we can do to empower students besides just throwing more money at the education system? I know that's a difficult question, but if you could share some of your thinking about it, I'd appreciate it. And thank you.
Thank you. So let me address the issue of the term rubber room.
Yes.
There obviously are processes that are in place if something occurs and a teacher does something that is inappropriate. And I certainly will work with any district and the City of New York so that we can facilitate whatever is possible to make sure that appropriate action is taken as soon as possible, and that professionals are treated appropriately, but we move through the process, because ultimately we need to make sure that the people that are in front of our students every day are trained and are appropriate in what they're doing. So that's my statement about that. And I am very, very supportive of constant improvement for teachers. And you saw in my proposal and my discussion that I believe it's extremely important that we have professional development for teachers across the state, that it should be equitable across the state, that we shouldn't have competition for who's going to get the funding to be able to do the kind of training that our teachers need. And I believe that the training of teachers ultimately puts them in a position to be better in the classroom. And I would anticipate that some of the situations that we face across the state in teachers doing things inappropriately hopefully would end, at least decrease. So I am very concerned about it, but I think one of the ways to do and address it is that we make sure that we provide every bit of training that's possible for our teachers so they can be competent in the classroom doing the things they need to do. The second issue, and you're right, it's not an easy thing, is it? You have funded schools, and you're correct. New York has funded schools in a way that has been supportive of the kinds of things that need to occur to bring student success. We are in a shift across this country in raising standards and in moving actually from one system of education to a very different approach to how we connect with kids, how we teach kids, and how teachers use the resources that they have to interact with kids. So let me give you a good example. In New York, we have the P-TECH system. We have schools, approximately 25, and we've added 7 or 8 this year, so even more P-TECH centers. P-TECH centers are taking students that you would anticipate would not be successful and graduate. And they're moving them through a system, high interest, very, very relevant because they in fact are connecting with jobs and with companies who will give them jobs and then give them experiences in that setting so that they can get better every day. So the students moving through a P-TECH program are students that are at-risk kids in our schools. A number of them are students with special needs. They are students who, in our traditional sense, probably wouldn't make it if we left them in a more traditional setting. But when we take them and put them in a setting that is designed around a different approach, it works. So I would suggest to you that we have to move New York State and the teachers of New York State, which I again get back to the critical piece of having staff development for teachers. We have to move the state so that we are reflective of the kinds of jobs that are necessary. All of them require, for the most part, they require post-secondary work. You talk about infrastructure, you talk about building roads, you talk about bridges, you talk about expansion of buildings. People now going into the trades are required to have additional training. And we want people to be able to, our students to be successful when they get in that setting and they have an opportunity for a great job. And the way to do that is to provide the training that is reflective of the jobs that are out there and this 21st century technology world we live in, where it isn't what you know, it's if you know how to find out what you don't know. And I think that's a critical piece and it responds to your point. But to do that, that transition is expensive. It does take resources. And it takes people that can think differently about how we're going to respond to kids.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyman Roth.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Just wanted to ask you a couple quick questions about some of the policy issues that were pushed for us. Let me tell you, it's very refreshing to be talking this year about funding various things instead of about policy issues, which dominated a lot of the conversation last year. But I am curious with the governor putting forth his proposal. He seemed to really put the onus completely on the state education department to enact those recommendations from the Common Core Task Force. I was just wondering what your thoughts are in terms of whether you think there is anything we need to do legislatively to empower the department to enact some of those recommendations?
Well, so if we walk through the recommendations, and there's probably, I would say, you can distill it down to 3 or 4 key areas. First of all, we have done the initial work on determining where we need to go with standards, and that is, we know that in a survey that was done by the State Ed Department, where we collected over 250,000 pieces of data and opinions related to all of the standards, We know that for the most part, 71% of the people that responded to that survey believe in higher standards. But they also gave us information that we need to review because they suggested moving standards, changing the difficulty in specific grade levels, for instance, early grades being more difficult than perhaps is appropriate for that age and grade level. So we have much work to do to review the standards for New York State. It needs to be an open and transparent process. It needs to have practitioners, that is, teachers and administrators from across the state involved in committees. And it needs to be done in a way that we can get input from the public in multiple ways and use that input to make recommendations back to the regions for what the standards for New York State students should be. We agree they need to be high standards. It is a normal thing to review standards every few years. You have put in legislation that they'll be reviewed after every 5 years. I think that's appropriate. And it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes people to work to make sure that a process like that can be done appropriately. There is no funding in here for any of that. So that's one area that I think that needs to be addressed. Secondly, I would suggest to you, and it was brought up a number of times in the testimony that we heard from across the state, from parents and stakeholders, and Senator Marcelino and Assemblywoman Nolan, as chairs of their committee, were part of our group. And as we talked about it, it was clear we have to support our teachers. In fact, on one of the slides in your deck, we point out that one of the specific examples of work to be done is helping teachers and giving them staff development, helping them understand the standards, how to teach the standards, and then supporting them in developing lesson plans that are related to the delivery of those standards. We have a resource that's been used in New York over the last several years called Engage New York. It's an online opportunity for teachers to get information. It needs to be worked on, but key to this is the staff development piece that was suggested as one of the key recommendations from the Governor's Task Force. It was recommendation number 9 and specifically speaks to across the board. It can't be a program where a district that has a great grant writer can get, because the districts that don't have the great grant writers have teachers and kids that need to have the support. So we need to have funding for staff development that is consistent for every teacher across the state, and we need to develop a career ladder so that every school has a master teacher that can support and help continuous ongoing improvement in our schools. We had a model that was used that previously had been funded through our Race to the Top grant. That funding is gone, but it was consistently, and all the people that I've talked to have indicated that the STLE, the Strengthening Teacher Leader Effectiveness model, was very effective, but everybody didn't get it. And so you have pockets in some of the most needy school districts and urban districts where we didn't have that support for teachers. And that will make a huge change when we see things changing every day in every classroom across the state. So there are other things that were also brought up. The issue of the testing. We need to think of different ways to test our children. We need to put in project-based assessments. Project-based assessments cost money. You have to develop them with the teachers of New York. You have to then put the teachers in place so that they can be supportive of the students who opt to do a project-based assessment. And then after you've done that, you have to have trained reviewers who will look at each of those with the appropriate rubric and consistently assess them across the state. So all of that is taking resources, and that was called for in the report, and it was not funded. So I think it's important for us to understand we all want what's right for our kids. We all want a state that can be proud of what they do for their children, but also can be a strong state in terms of developing its workforce and all of the things that are necessary for success. And if you follow, and I was so pleased to be part of a very productive workforce group that put together these recommendations, if you follow the recommendations and support us to make these things happen, we will do them.
Just getting slightly more specific, so teacher evaluations. We know,
Right.
the action was taken to delay the use of the scores in the evaluations, but at least in my view, as that provision in statute currently stands, I find it very limiting, and I'm hearing from some of my superintendents, concerns on. I think that was the major piece in terms of general public concern on the testing side, but then it kind of, I think, leaves the rest of it for the districts to work through and figure out how the assessment piece is going to work on top of, things like the outside evaluators and things of that nature. So do you view from the department that the legislature needs to make any further changes to the teacher evaluation as in current statute?
So there's no question that we have to look at what the evaluation process, is, and then how it's constructed and how it's connected to performance of students, and how we do that. There's no question that has to occur. Right now, what we've done is we have stepped back, and by putting in place this transition period until 2019-2020 school year, we have much to do. We have work to do on the standards. We have work to do on staff development and curriculum. All of those things were part of the commission. We have work to do relative to the assessments. And again, teachers need to be very involved in that. And we need, as we're moving forward, we need to put together a team of people from all of our practitioner groups and our parent groups to talk about what is an appropriate way to have an accountability system in the state of New York. So in New York, we invest over $60 billion a year in education. You support that. If you want to have a great system and you want to get better and you want to provide what students need, we need to figure out a way that we can all know that we are accountable for that investment and that we're doing what needs to be done for all kids across the state. So we need to do an evaluation system, not just for teachers, for principals, and across the state for our districts. But it doesn't happen overnight, and it does require input, and it needs to look at how we're progressing in those areas that are related to it, like the standards development, like the assessments, like the work with teachers, so that when we have that evaluation in place, it is fair and appropriate, and it talks about the importance of helping teachers get better with continuous improvement every day. No evaluation should be trying to skewer people. It shouldn't be. And unfortunately, I think the rhetoric has gone that direction, and I think we have to shift that immediately.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. We've been joined by Assemblyman Weppering, Senator.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Next would be Senator John DeFrancisco.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for meeting with me earlier this year on what I'm going to talk about now, my pet project. And we keep bringing it up every year, and hopefully we're getting closer at this point in time. And that basically is we pay for remediation of students that get college degrees, high school degrees, that the amount of remediation is absolutely unbelievable. And when this discussion when we have this discussion, it's always, well, the urban schools, people have different problems, different issues, poverty, et cetera, et cetera. I was so pleased when I saw an editorial from Newsday, which doesn't normally happen, but what I was pleased about was that the high school graduation rate on Long Island, $22,000 a year average for each student. the Long Island everybody complains about that gets too much state aid, except the Long Islanders, was graduation rate 89%, but only 54% of students got scores on their region algebra and English exams that indicate college readiness. Long Island. I know there's some better schools on Long Island, some schools that aren't so good. In Roosevelt, the graduation rate in 2015 was 72%. College preparedness, 3.3%. And the most noted high schools that are outstanding high schools, at least 90% did head off to college. About 70% of the community college students and 50% of the four-year college students in the state paid for remedial college classes to retake classes graduates didn't master in high school. And what I've been trying to do, and we've talked about it, is try to get some consensus between SUNY and CUNY and the Commissioner of Education and Education Regents, members of the Regents Board, a way to identify these students earlier. And rather than in the senior year, and everybody knows it happens, if you got your required courses, you're either in some type of study hall or you are allowed to go off to some phony baloney job that's supposed to prepare you for life. So I guess what I'm saying is I wanted to let everybody know that we've already had a meeting with the Commissioner and the Chancellors of CUNY and SUNY, and we're hoping to come up with some type of solution. But is there any comment any brief comment you would like to make? And then I will go on to my next actual question.
Well, I appreciate your involvement of this and your support for it, because I do believe that we have a responsibility when a student has a diploma from one of the high schools in New York State, that they shouldn't automatically have to go and take, and over 40% of them go and have to have remediation before they can take regular courses that matriculate to a degree, whether it's an associate degree or whether it's a four-year baccalaureate degree. So we have to stop that. And I've started having conversations early in my tenure with Dr. Zimfer and also working with CUNY. We believe that we can put in place an assessment that can be done in 10th grade that would allow us to know what areas particularly a student needed to have, and then provide that intervention in high school prior to a student graduating. And as you're aware, our conversation was that this would be something that should be done for every student that wants it, but that it could be an optional thing. But I will tell you, parents need to understand that we have a responsibility, as do they, in helping us to get their student where they need to be. And I would agree with you, if you look at the schedules, I believe across the state, we could make sure that our students, many, many more of them, were ready to go into college-level coursework when they walked out of high school. If we all agree, from CUNY, SUNY, and the independent colleges and the state ed department, we can make that happen.
And if the parents learn about this and learn that they're going to save money and their TAP grants aren't just going to get prepared for college while they're in college, I think parents would buy into it. And we as a state should make an investment to make sure it happens. The other thing that I first elected office was the school board of the city of Syracuse. That was 112 years ago, actually 38. And what seems to be happening more and more is that there is an atmosphere in the classroom that is, put it mildly, not conducive to learning. And that applies across the board to varying degrees to all types of school districts. And I really believe much of this stuff can be worked out by teachers teaching as long as they got an atmosphere in which to teach. We have violence in the city schools that, teachers come to me all the time. I got struck, I got hit. The kid's doesn't get suspended, and he's back in my classroom or somebody else's next week, and there's no consequences. Now, I don't know if there's any statewide policy on that, but recently the Syracuse City School District was taken to task by our Attorney General, who indicated that there was some type of racial bias as to the number of suspensions. And they came up together, Schneiderman, with his education expertise, and the city school district, what the suspension procedure should be, which resulted in nobody gets suspended anymore, okay? Very rarely. And you talk to any teacher in the school, and the atmosphere is getting worse. So my question is there any statewide policy, rather than the Attorney General moving into the realm of education, where certain standards have to be met and certain things can happen if someone is breaking those rules with respect to how they should act in a classroom so there's a good atmosphere?